Okay, so that's our sort of background work, right? So I was trying to draw the connection between the idea of doing oral histories and how does that even relate to health and chronic disease and things like that. I mean, that is our field, kind of. So these might seem at first to be really different things, but I think we've made the case. I mean, I think based on what I'm reading when you're writing, that you see that connection. And so that's one of the things that background part would do. On top of that, it would also talk a lot about, maybe the background of how we arrived at this project. And so some of you, at least know a little bit more about that because they were there for some of the stuff that happened when we did the Sagan course and went to Italy. But that doesn't mean that they're only going to be the ones writing about that. I need everybody to understand sort of the whole project by the time we actually start interviewing people. And so that's what the proposal thing actually does for us, is allows us to actually go through all of this stuff you've already seen and try to put it together in a kind of comprehensive way that tells the story, the listener, and whomever what it is that we're going to move toward doing. On top of that, we have you three. Are you all looking for writing options in the class?
Yeah.
Okay. And I think Kalina might be too, but I know that I don't think that you guys are. And Lauren, I don't remember. I think she probably is. So in essence, what we have are, I think, 5 people looking for writing options and 2 people who aren't. And it just happens to be that those 2 people are doing departmental honors projects that are qualitative research in nature. So when I look at 7 people in these different sections, what I think we're going to do is kind of have multiple levels of sort of understanding that happen here. So Abby and Elise have more background maybe than others, and we'll be able to share that with people, whomever might be focusing on various parts of this proposal. So everybody's going to be writing, but since there's 5 people that need a writing option, I think you're going to be doing more writing, and I think that Abby and Elise will be doing a little bit more structuring, and then I'll be also doing that structuring. We'll be talking about this all together. It seems like a funny process because you'll stand up and present it to all the people you've already talked about it to. But when it comes together in its final product that day, right before fall break, we'll be able to say, that's really good, but it doesn't flow great, or here's some pieces of the puzzle that are missing still, or this part doesn't make sense in there, and we can make that final adjustment, and the people who are doing writing options can go back in, and fix those parts, go to the writing center, get it in good shape so that later in the semester, we have at least this background part written and sensible, and it flows, and it's all good. Elise and Abby benefit because they are doing this departmental honors qualitative research project, and they have a chance to walk through almost a practice round of a proposal before they actually do their own. So it feels like this organization makes a lot of sense for everybody, but I kind of want everybody to be aware of why people are going to be in the different roles that they're going to be in. So does that make some sense? Though Elise doesn't know this, but she'll know it soon enough, I guess. And so, I mean, it's starting to feel a little bit like this, though we can work on the structure. But they usually start with an introduction. So, they usually start with an introduction, which ironically is, when do you write the introduction? Well, a lot of times you write it last. Because if you read an introduction, it's usually some kind of summary of all the things that are to come. Well, you don't know that until you've written most of the rest. So you can structure the things you might want to talk about in there, but that'll probably come later. Then it seems like, the next step is this idea of, is a literature review / kind of justification, like why are we doing this project in the way that we are? And for us, that's going to involve a lot of things that you've already written and stuff that's available to you that you can go back and fill in the gaps. But as we divide this up, it's probably going to be the case where somebody takes a sizable amount of what everybody's written and sort of pulls out some of the best. So I've been trying to write like themes or examples of things on the side of your papers. You saw with the slow food thing, you guys pulled 4 themes out. So are those things you might want to use in there? We can kind of think about that. And so this might be, this would be sort of the making the case, I'd call it, why we're looking at oral histories of food with older people in Delaware, Ohio, in a class in a PE department that we're thinking about health. Like you have to make that connection. And so that's going to involve telling, and the fact that this is a parallel project with this university, this Slow Food University, you have to sort of tell the story of what the connections are there with slow food. So, there's going to be slow food, there's going to be all sorts of stuff about the food system. There's going to be, obviously, the health piece is going to come in. So we've alluded to, obesity crisis, chronic disease, all that stuff. So some stuff in there about that part, right? And then, I guess I'll go over here. And then the last, this is the last, but this is a pretty big last, which is the methods of the study. And the methods involve all kinds of stuff. Usually we have to write about a qualitative framework. In other words, why qualitative research for something like this? So you've already explained why we're doing this, and now how do we do it? Well, first, you can talk about why the qualitative framework is a better approach for something like this than trying to stuff it into a quantitative framework for this. Not to say that it's the best research type ever, that nobody should do anything else, but for this is this makes a lot of sense. Also in here would go something about the history of the project. So here's where I mentioned that there's some context that might be the history of the project that might be available from at least that maybe could be built into that as well. Then we did various kinds of observation here. We've done historical research kinds of observation. You did some observation of like these food access points, markets and stuff, that you would describe why we did that sort of thing. Obviously we're going to do interviews. A little bit about the analysis, although that's a little harder to write about at this point because we haven't talked about it that much. And then lastly, our sort of subjectivity. So this is where those food philosophies and things come in. Everybody's writing about where they're coming from when it comes to food and their approach. And I'll have you kind of extend that a little bit later and think about how biased are we kind of about certain things. We make assumptions and all this stuff that we write is based on our life experiences. We have to describe those a little bit. So where we come from, those kinds of things. So it'll probably look something like this, which looks like a whole crazy amount of stuff. And I think what's worked well in the past is to start with a with some boundaries, some concise boundaries as far as length goes, and make sure that they're really dense and good. And then if they need to expand, great. But rather than say, the methods section, just go ahead and go write it and let's see what we get. Let's say that this part is going to be 3/4 of a page, and this part is going to be 2 pages, and this part, you know what I mean? So that it's more. We'll try to get it all in there. If you feel like it's not enough, then we'll expand. But to start small and then build from there, I think is going to be pretty helpful. But we'll start with a couple of little outline things, and we'll go from there. Now, there's not a lot of time, obviously, between now and this midterm time, and so that's going to be one of the jobs is sort of seeing how much is realistic to do in that period of time. So that's why starting with some smaller goals, I guess, some smaller page limits and boundaries in terms of that. For that particular thing is going to be good. And then we can expand it for the writing options and stuff, especially as we move later on in the semester. You can build the size that you need to. So that's kind of where that's kind of going to go. Once everybody's here on Thursday, we'll spend a few minutes sort of dividing up and talking about what might be good to focus on and seeing how we get there between now and the time that occurs. Oh, and then of course, this isn't for midterm. we'll have some results. That's the last part of a research project, is the results, the description, the analysis, all that stuff. Like, for us, that's going to be probably not a written product. It's probably going to be some kind of a presented product that will be, then also this stuff will be sort of built into, boiled down into some shorter descriptions, and built into a larger sort of presentation. And the cool part is that this visual thing that we do at the end, we'll have all this interview stuff, this video recorded interview stuff, so we can pull clips from that, that support whatever themes we start to see emerge from how we get there with the questions that we ask and the times that we meet with everybody. So what'll be nice, rather than this big written thing with like paragraphs of text, is that we'll probably be able to have smaller chunks of these interviews with different people that show some of these themes emerging as we find them in the later part of the semester. What I'm trying to do right now is arrange a way that once we record the interviews, the traditional way to do qualitative research results is that you would interview somebody and there would be an audio recording of that, and you would have to sit down and transcribe that audio recording, literally typing out every word that people are saying. It takes a long time. I think we asked last year or 2 years ago when we did the class, it was like maybe 4 times as long as the interview. So the interview's an hour, it took 4 or 5 hours to transcribe that interview. Small. We're not going to do that, because we're going to have a lot of interviews. It's going to be horrible. And we have a smaller class. Like then we had 16 people, and we only had 5 interviews that were like an hour long or something, and it still took forever. So I'm thinking, oh man, how are we going to do this? So what I'm trying to arrange, and I think we can, I don't know how this will work exactly, but it'll be more that you're going to be watching those interviews and pulling the themes that are coming out. First, we'll start with the model and say, what are you hearing, in the interviews from the model, and where in the time segment on the video did you hear those things? Then as a class, we can go in and watch some of those and start to see if we're going to call those something else, and see if we can sort of put the story together differently from those. Because what you do with the audio interviews is somebody types them all up, we send them out to everybody, and then you highlight, like in the text, different colors based on the themes that you're sort of hearing or reading as you read these interviews. So let's say maybe we do an interview and we start to hear a lot about, and I think we will, about, I don't know, read sustainability we call it, but whatever, like not wasting anything. That seems to be a theme that's coming out of the interviews. They're talking about how they use every part of the animal or something. If you were doing it with the transcribed thing, with the typed text, you would have the Word document in front of you, and you would sort of highlight those things in like yellow and say, yellow is sustainability or something. Red is about family. Blue is about hard work. I don't know. Those are the kinds of things you might hear. And then we would bring them together and see if we really think that that's what they're saying, or are they talking about something else, and are there other pieces, and we might be able to rearrange the text that way. In this case, I think we're going to do that without that transcription step, because we will have those video interviews, and I think there's software, and I'm hoping that we can get it, or do it somehow, that you can watch them and mark those sections of the video yourself, so that the data would actually be audiovisual data that's marked. And you can put tags on there and call it something. I know it exists, it's just whether we can feasibly all sort of use it somehow. And so I'm trying to work with Chuck in the AV area to get that to happen. So that's my hope, that we get it taken care of that way. Now, we're going to have somebody in here in a week, so that'll be our first sort of chance to watch an interview and see how we hold that stuff together. But I think, so our results aren't going to, we're not even really going to be writing all that much initially. It'll be more sort of a mix of some blurbs of writing and some audiovisual stuff. And, yeah. So the questions for the interview are going to obviously impact our themes that we find, but it's our job to kind of move beyond those questions. I guess that's, that's the whole process of this qualitative framework of doing research. So anyway, this is sort of where it's going to go, and I thought it would be a good time to sort of lay that out there for all of you. Do you have any questions about it? How do you feel about that? All right, I mean, does it make sense? Daunting? You don't feel too bad? The cool part is it starts to feel like we're kind of this research, I mean we are really, but this research team, and we're kind of putting this project together as a group and having our own roles in it and all that stuff, which is really rewarding in the end, I think, when it does all come together. So if you've got anxiety about it, so do I, it's okay, because I mean, I'm setting it up to come out as a good product in the end, and so I'm hoping that it does. And sometimes things, fall apart, or people don't show up for interviews and stuff, and we just have to adapt to those things and come up with something by the end. But that's where my anxiety comes from. Not from thinking you can't do it, but from just more like, I think this is going to work out, and all my experience says it will, but you never know until the end. So that's always a little bit of a fun thing. The other thing that we'll do on Thursday is to start to think about contacting our friends either Thursday or Tuesday, by probably Thursday talking about it, and by Tuesday starting to contact some of our interviewees. It's still a month off or so, but I think retired people are busy too, so that's probably the minimum amount of time that we want to give them to sort of plan to come out and meet with us. So we'll have to start contacting them, and probably what we'll do is kind of do a rolling thing, like everybody will have a list of a couple of people. They'll know it's not like they're going to be that surprised. They know that they signed up to do this. And if your first person isn't available, or you move to the second one on the list, and then we see where we're at the next class meeting, and we kind of set up more after that. It'll be a pretty general call, like, hi, I'm Zach from Ohio Wesleyan. You might remember that you signed up for this, that you were interested in doing qualitative research. Well, you were interested in doing an interview about your food memories, and so I'm calling to kind of arrange a time, and here's what we have available, and just really general. We will ask them to bring any relevant sort of photographs too. I think that might be a neat way to get them to connect to what they're talking about. And other than that, I think that's about it. Now, we may show up with a particular general topic on a particular day, and we'll just have to see where we are at that point. But we can't wait until we know exactly what the limits of our interview will be until that day, because it'll just be too late to let them know that we're doing it. Okay. So, then, with all that having been said, you guys did these historical summaries, and I know everybody, every group is represented, I think, if I'm not mistaken. So you guys are working together, so your full group is represented. Kalina was with you, and then you were a three-person group here, right? Let's just talk first about kind of how this went. I mean, did you find out some neat stuff? Was it too much stuff? Was it too, or was it great? What was it?
We found some neat stuff eventually after starting to really got kind of repetitive as far as the themes and stuff go.
Okay.
I mean, we talked so much about squirrels and corn, but I don't know, our time era was pretty interesting.
Okay. Do you feel like that you're leaving this historical research, this observation, with a better sense of what the general food system might have been like at that time, and how it might have been different than it is now? And not only that, but how, I guess the deeper question is, understanding more about why it was the way that it was, and what the limitations maybe were in some of the areas in our model, and other, the roles of people in some of those areas. I mean, do you feel like you got some stuff in a variety of different areas from this task?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's great.
Right areas to
Yeah, so like, social organization, socioeconomic kind of stuff, technology, those are the ones that occur to me most readily that I would expect that you would have found some stuff. But do you think you were able to, in any of the observations, kind of look beyond the thing you were seeing, maybe it was an image or the description that you had in front of you, and actually see something else that may have been under the surface there. So I don't remember if it was this reading or a different one, but someone was studying school leaders, and they were going into their offices and interviewing them or whatever, and there was this one schoolmaster or whatever, was it, I think it was in England, so they call them schools.
Headmasters?
Headmasters. Do they call them headmasters?
No.
It's all headmaster. Okay. Well, anyway, it was a female, and she was very strict and stern, and put on this very tough kind of exterior. And they went to her office to interview her, and there were all of these really happy family pictures and this very comfortable environment with nice furniture and things in there. You might expect to go in and find just a plain old beat up wooden desk and sort of a little thing of pencils. And here, there's a totally different persona. Now they interviewed her, and her demeanor was the same and everything else, but that was an observation that they had as part of the process that told a different story. And they were, part of observation is looking for things that aren't consistent with what you think. Do you think you saw any things like that? Not necessarily that weren't consistent, but that you said, based on how this looked, or they're describing this, I wonder if people, because these were roles that were normal, I don't know, did you see any pictures maybe that you saw things in there that brought other things to light? Or did you stay mostly on this is what we saw in the picture?
Well, we did ours we read through all of our actual literature stuff, and then went back to the pictures and kind of whatever key points we had from the literature, we found pictures that reinforced those. So in some cases, seeing the actual picture made the textual stuff much more clear. When in terms of the mills and the first Delaware agricultural society event was in our mind, when the event is today was completely different than what the event was then, but text and describe the picture.
Okay, that's kind of what I mean. So you could have added to it, it could have added other bits of information to what you read.
I didn't look at the pitches. I did this and then cleaned to the pitches and that was one. And
Okay.
just
So you have some, but you have some of her.
Oh, I have it, yeah, I have what she wrote down.
We kind of did a combination of both. We laid all of our pictures and kind of just, the little sentence, little things, and we actually made a timeline starting from the 1900s all the way to 1950, and then we went through the literature and kind of matched what was going on in the literature with the timeline, and kind of just drew connections, that sort of thing.
Okay. So what do you think the best way is to, because what I'd like to do here, and that's why we're having a camera going and all that stuff, is to not just describe what each of the time sections were like, because that's important, but also to start to get everybody else to understand what each one was like that's here, and then to sort of look at what some of these transitional points were that have led us to where we are. We can watch Food Inc. and it talks about how industrialized everything is, but were there things along this historical path that now start to come out that you say, oh, yeah, I can see why we moved in that direction, or I can see how this newer system may have at first seemed like really great. Like if you went back to 1850 or 1900 even and said, this is the way we're doing things now, people probably would have been like, that's fantastic, that would solve this problem, and it would be, such a godsend to be able to actually not deal with this all the time, whatever this is. That's another thing that we want to kind of understand a little bit better, and not just say, it's really bad, and big evil food, and this is terrible, but how did we get there? It's a more dynamic story than we just suddenly got all bad. So I don't know, we could walk through the main points of each of the time frames. I think we should probably frame it in terms of at least to start with in terms of the model, because I think we need to use that as a framework to start, and then we can always sort of jump away from that where we need to. Did everybody plug things into that model to begin with, at least as a starting point?
There was some things that didn't fit, and I couldn't even think of a theme for them, so I just, that's good.
Okay, I mean, one thing that we could do is to use the board and use these different segments of board. So we have 18, we have 3, main segments, and we can kind of fill them up and get the images popped up under the different categories of the model, and then see if we can start to see how it might have changed across. I don't know. Does that seem like it would work? It's hard for me to know without knowing exactly what you have, but we can start there.
Yeah.
Start there? Okay. Let's do that. Let me get ready, so let me make sure that you can see that on the screen here. I think so.
Yeah, I think it's like pointed here.
Well,